as rep counts and performances so far, I think that both guys have done a lot of really, really good things, and some, more notable visually than others. But I also think both guys have made some mistakes with the football.
Welcome back to another edition of the Enough Said program. My name is Dan Barreiro, joined as always by Justin Gaard, and for the second consecutive week, and I think this is going to be 3 out of 4.
Yep.
Natalie Brinegar, kind enough to help us out in the absence of, I barely remember, I think it's Lori Fisher, I think is her last name.
It's Brinegar month. It's Brinegar month here on Enough Said, which is great for us.
It's outstanding.
I'll be back in a couple weeks again.
There it is.
Lori's back next week, so
Okay,
don't worry. Starting with Vikings, of course, training camp rolls on and the quarterbacks remain in the spotlight. Sam Darnold worked with the starters this week while J.J. McCarthy took snaps with the second stringers. There have been ups and downs for both quarterbacks. There's also been some injuries on defense, and we're just 8 days away from the first preseason game, Dan.
Well, I ask you, here's my toss-up question for you, Justin. Can you, to me this is the key question, can you do two things at once this season? Can you win more games, which ultimately is what Kevin O'Connell told us, he's going to play whoever can help him win more games, and play J.J. McCarthy pretty quick? To me, that's the tough question, because you can make the argument that in the perfect world of his development, you really don't worry as much about how many games you win.
Right.
That's a hard thing for any team and any coach to do in any season, especially if you view yourselves as having a lot of really skilled players, certainly offensively. So to that question, you say what? Are those, at the start of the season, are those concepts incompatible?
Can I answer your question with a question?
Sure.
How good's your defense?
Yeah.
That would be my follow-up, because they retooled it a little bit, right? We've talked a lot about the quarterbacks. We've talked a lot about the running game. Haven't talked a ton about the defense that had some key pieces now missing, with Hicks moving on, obviously Danielle Hunter moving on. I think it also depends on how good J.J. McCarthy actually is, and we're not going to know that until you throw him out there. How about this for a toss-up question? Because there are people actually doing this, Dan, and I want to know, do you think it's a bit, or do you think people are this crazy about football? They are tallying the rookie quarterback's touchdown to interception ratio at training camp, and I'll have you know that J.J. McCarthy currently leads in that tally and in that comparison. Caleb Williams has thrown more picks. Drake May might not even see the field. They're basically going to try to cut him in New England if you listen to the camp reports. But we actually have people that are comparing rookie quarterback stats in training camp to each other. Is that a bit, or is that just because football's insane? Football
gets more insane, and the analytics get more insane. So I guess I'm not totally surprised. And it's all we have to go on at this point. You just had the first preseason game last night, Hall of Fame game, called early because of bad weather. I was actually hoping for overtime, but that's just me because I love football even this early. I'll throw it another way too, and we did talk about this with O'Connell, and he kind of talked around it. But the interesting question too is I understand their plan and I understand what they're saying publicly, but does their plan allow for the possibility that McCarthy blows them away? Yeah. And maybe they already know the answer to that. Maybe they'd say, Dan, we love you, but behind the scenes, we like him. Yep. We're not regretful we drafted him, but it's going to be a process like we expected. But I hope they let this thing play out, and I guess I'm showing my bias against Sam Darnold. I don't love the guy. I understand he looked a little better last year when he was finally around a great team, right? But that was, how much did he play? He didn't really play all that much. Right. And I tend to believe on Darnold, even though he's been a victim, you could argue, of bad infrastructure around him and bad teams around him and perhaps even bad coaching around him, that he's one of those guys who looks pretty, or can, in practice where the pass rush isn't allowed to get to him. And that in game situations with games on the line, that's where he tends to not be very good. And that's really what determines whether a player can be a franchise quarterback or even a serviceable quarterback while you wait for the franchise quarterback to get ready. So if there was somebody I had more faith in ahead of him, I might say, let's just calm this whole thing down. And I don't want to rush anything, but I also don't want to slow the process too much either.
The plan should allow for J.J. when he's ready to just play and have no guilt about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's here for a reason. I know Kwesi didn't want to call him a bridge quarterback, but that's what he is. right?
Correct.
If he
100%.
wasn't a bridge quarterback, he wouldn't have been available to them for a good sum of $10 million. But
1 year free agent.
Exactly.
Deal, yeah.
He wouldn't have been available for this role if this was not the role that he was meant to play.
Well, the best of the best are competing in Paris. The 2024 Summer Olympics are happening now. The U.S. is leading in the medal count. And of course, there is a lot to cover here. No surprise, lots of attention on the gymnastics teams. The women bringing home gold, the men's team earning bronze. Some people are talking about the choice of starters for the men's basketball team, but they've won their game so far. And of course, every Olympics, it's always fun to watch those sports you've never heard of, cheer on these athletes you don't know in these obscure sports. It's just a bunch of fun. Dan.
Well, Justin and I, this segment may turn off a part of our audience because we are both ringheads. We are,
yes,
and
we
that's
love
a
the
term
Olympics.
for people who love the Olympics. And I'm not sure. Maybe not everybody shares the passion. I think it's a little easier because it feels more accessible. The time difference isn't as great. COVID is in the rearview mirror, so there's ambiance, there's atmosphere, there's people in the seats. But I can tell you, as a guy who obviously grew up on covering both the newspaper and now broadcast, bats and balls, the classic, traditional sports, I love this period because it's different, because I don't know everything going in that I have equity on regarding football, basketball, baseball, hockey. And I'm thinking, is that so harmful? It's actually, I think, should be, even for bats and balls purists, refreshing to follow different tremendous athletes in that setting in sports that perhaps most of the rest of the year or rest of the 4-year period, you're not going to pay any attention to.
Well, and I think the ratings would back up your claims. The ratings have been monstrous,
They
right?
have,
And
right.
I think the time difference does help because we can watch everything basically during the day, right? You can watch the gymnastics live during the day.
Correct.
They obviously repackage it for prime time and give you the highlights of everything. But you can find that it's so accessible now because it's 2024. You can find any event you want to exactly while it is going on. And there's no shortage of stories either. That's the beautiful part. We have so many local angles here. We've talked about it. Obviously, Suni Lee coming back from what she came from to win a bronze. That was an incredible moment on Thursday. Simone Biles, what do you even say about her at this point? But I think what's helped other sports, Dan, like with the familiarity of LeBron James, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, all these people that have played forever. It used to be, and you covered Olympics, there weren't a lot of repeat offenders. Like you get your crack, the greats of the greats would get maybe 2, right? Simone now has been around forever. Katie Ledecky has been around forever. And they're both still just 27 years old. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be stunned if Simone wasn't back in 2028 for Los Angeles to continue to do it. But the stories have been amazing with the blue blood sports, so to speak, the gymnastics and the swimming. But I think my favorite moment might be the 51-year-old Poland sniper who looks like he just rolled out of bed, threw on a T-shirt, and won a silver medal.
Exactly.
Like out of nowhere. Who is this guy? He looks like he should be a villain in like a Bourne or a Bond movie. And now he's a meme that we're probably going to use for the rest of time. That's the Olympics.
It's all of it is. And to get back to the gymnastics part of this thing, you had, Biles is obviously an all-time great. But let's go back again, for the all-around competition, the 3 individuals who are on the stand. Biles' case, she withdrew, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she
in Tokyo.
For all kinds of reasons, she said, I'm done with this thing. And at the time, some people thought she might be done with it forever. You had in silver, Andrade, the woman
Brazilian.
from Brazil, I think 2 ACLs in her case.
Yeah.
An unbelievable history. And then, of course,
left
Suni
home
Lee.
at 9 years old.
Right.
Left her mom at 9 years old to go train in Rio. That's incredible.
And then the Suni Lee story, which obviously she's got major kidney issues. She's worried about her just living, let alone reaching, being able to reach back and summon up the strength to get back to where she was. Those were the 3 individuals on the stand. So even if you don't care about gymnastics, and I would submit to you should, because they're that magnificent to watch, and say, well, those back stories are worthy of consideration, which will tell you that even though they're big names, what they have been through to get there. And it's, you mentioned, discovering weird things. The other night, I'm popping around, and I happen upon with my daughter. We suddenly find ourselves lost in a doubles badminton match, and it's China.
Not involving America.
Right. It's China versus Taipei, and we're going. This is. It ended up going to overtime, and you get invested, even though you know nothing about the athletes. That to me is what makes the Olympics so magical.
By the way, the NBA players who aren't getting enough clock right now, they'll be fine. Jason Tatum will be fine.
Yes.
Tyrese Halliburton will be fine.
I'm not interviewing for anything. I'm just am who I am and put it out there. I think this is going to be really important, that the best decision and the best for the vice president to make. That's whatever makes soon-to-be President Harris the most effective candidate and most effective president. That's what they need to see, and that will be up to her.
Governor Tim Walz responding to questions about whether he will be Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate as she seeks the White House. He's become one of the top contenders for the job. Other frontrunners include Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, and Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Harris is expected to name a running mate next week, just in time for a battleground state tour, so we'll see if Walz makes the ticket. Dan? You
know, it's an interesting soundbite, Natalie, that you used there, because it reminds me of when the Minnesota was trying to get its first Super Bowl. There's a process, right, that you go through, and everybody has to figure out the town has to figure out what its strategy is going to be.
Yeah.
And I mocked and ridiculed the notion that, don't beg, stop begging, it's unseemly. We're a fine community without the Super Bowl.
We got it, though.
By the way, we got it that year. So 92. I had to eat a little crow. But the story at the time was we didn't beg, that we kind of took a really understated approach. Maybe that's what Walzy was doing there, too, kind of like he was doing, hey, whatever Vice President Harris thinks is the best decision. He seemed to be doing a good job of hiding any begging possibilities, right? He didn't seem too eager for the job. Maybe that will help his cause. I don't know.
It's possible. I think everybody's they're kind of all slow playing a little bit. And the fact that I think there are a number of candidates that would make sense for her, it kind of goes back to me, Dan, is why they were running on the Biden train for so long. Like, they probably should have been cultivating this stuff in July of 2023 rather than July and August of 2024. I think he'd serve his purpose well. I think he would help in the battleground states. I think he'd play well in Wisconsin. I think he'd play well in Michigan. I think that's probably where they're going to deploy him. I don't think he's going to be the guy. The more you look into it, it seems like Shapiro is kind of the front runner. I know your guy, Mayor Pete, has jumped into the fray as well. I don't think it's probably his time at the moment. He might be running for president in 8 years with the track that he's on, but I'm fascinated to see it. We've been, obviously big in the vice presidential sweepstakes historically, going back to Mondale. We thought Teepaw was going to be John McCain's guy, if not for probably needing a total wild card, and that's what they did with Sarah Palin. It probably would have been Teepaw. So we're kind of used to this position, Dan. You know why? Because we're just so reasonable.
Is that what
we're just
it is?
Such a reasonable people, and we just know how to play.
I do think if your goal is to get a battleground state, and a big one is Pennsylvania, that Shapiro is the way to go.
Agree.
The one reason, though, he is being, I think, a little bit unfairly isolated on his views when it comes to the Palestinian situation, the Palestinian protests, quite frankly.
Right. And
there are people who wonder if that in of itself is a little anti-Semitic because of his religious background. That's the question, is will he pass that test enough, or will there be enough concern about, far left blowback that they say, well, then we'll settle with Tim Walz or for Tim Walz or somebody else. But if you're trying to win a state, I'm not sure Governor Walz brings you another state. His feistiness is clear.
He can help you.
And that might help, but ultimately I think this is about the math on the states, the electoral college. Not the popular votes, the electoral college votes. And I think the Democrats pretty much have to get Pennsylvania.
Well, we're going to talk about President Trump right now, but the one thing he said at the NABJ conference that made a lot of sense, and I don't think he really meant it this way, is vice president really doesn't matter to the ticket. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it does, but it doesn't. But because the margins are so small nowadays, like if this can win you Pennsylvania, I think it's worth that bet. It's worth that bet.
We're going into too much time, but I think Vance is already in that area where he might be hurting Trump.
Oh, he's hurting for sure. Yeah.
And so then you say, well, let's just make sure we don't make a pick that hurts us.
Right.
And we will still be ahead. To your point about the
run the ball. Don't try a risky pass. Run the ball, hand it off, run the clock.
I hope Kevin O'Connell remembers that, running the ball a little bit.
Why we brought it up.
That's a callback.
Full circle.
All right, Justin brought up the conference. It was controversial in Chicago as former President Trump took questions at the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention. Right out of the gate, the former president was asked about past comments toward women of color. He said the question was asked in a horrible manner, and exchanges became increasingly more tense from there. Mr. Trump also questioned Kamala Harris's race, whether she was in fact black, referring to her Jamaican and Indian heritage.
Well,
it's quite a lead-in.
Yeah, it is quite a lead-in. You're allowed to be more than one thing if that's what your background is. That's the moral of that story. I am just delighted that the NABJ did not cave to the pressure from lefties, in some cases, lefty journalists who demanded that they retract the invitation, that they refuse to put him on that stage.
Some from their own organization,
exactly,
right?
And I'm going, what are you doing? This is it's journalists, right? It's presumably editors, reporters. What are reporters supposed to do? Ask questions, vet. He is, whatever you think of him, the Republican nominee for President of the United States. He was the president previously. I think now, was it a perfect job of, quote unquote, holding his feet to the fire? It doesn't have to be, because if it did nothing else, it revealed once again a reminder of the racially charged, racist modes he's capable of going down, that even some righties have said, we got enough stuff on Harris. Let's stay down this road. Let's not deviate to this other ramp where we're doing the stupidity of trying to decide, is she black? Really? What is she? Has she just adopted that? So to me, it turned out to be a success. But more importantly, I think the fact that there are people who are actually demanding that they deplatform him, that frightens me.
Well, it's not the first time we've heard that, though. It's not the first time we've seen that. We've talked about that going back to debates or bringing him on for town halls. He's, I think, at this moment, still the favorite to win the White House, right?
Pretty close.
I guess that's
it's
probably
tightening, but it's close.
Maybe that doesn't matter, but he's one of two candidates that are running for president of the United States. It makes total sense.
30.
And it did show, I mean, he derailed immediately, right? He absolutely, because the whole thing is, we've talked about this going back. I remember on this show talking about the Clinton and Trump debates. How long can Trump stay disciplined and stay in his lane and not derail and make it about all this stuff that only hurts him? In this case, it was one question. It was one question. He completely derailed. He completely devolved. I do agree with people, though, that are saying Harris needs to start going into these same arenas, so to speak, because
she needs to be doing more interviews, period.
Yes, that's what I meant. She's been very Bidenized right now, where she's basically doing the speeches and the appearances, not these type of things. Because that should be a layup for her. It really should be if she's up for the job.
Reporters should not have to apologize for talk about safe spaces at a convention that's supposed to be about journalism. It's preposterous to me.
Well, the MLB trade deadline has come and gone.
The important stuff. Let's get to it.
The Twins making just one move. They picked up Toronto reliever Trevor Richards for a Class A prospect. Richards is a pending free agent, and he gives the Twins a veteran arm to bolster the bullpen.
Is there any air left in the balloon, Dan, to be deflated? I feel like we had a huge hot air balloon last October and November, and it wasn't like, one of my kids went up and popped it like a piñata. It's just been this slow deflation ever since then. And this was kind of the final sputtering of the helium coming out of the balloon, that they were so inactive that they were literally the last team to make a trade. The guy that they traded for, most casual fans don't even know who the dude is. No offense to him, not his fault. They traded a random top 40 prospect that they're not in love with at the moment. I think he was a single-A baseball player that our guy Aaron Gleeman from The Athletic described essentially as a low-level utility man, which to me is a poor man's Nick Punto. They did nothing at the deadline. You talked about two tracks earlier with the Vikings. There's two tracks with the Twins right now. There's the team track and there's the organization track.
The ownership track.
Yeah, the ownership track, exactly. And I continue to be disappointed in it. I think most fans continue to be disappointed in it. And I'll never understand why they treat this like it's an actual business. It's a vanity purchase. They're worth billions of dollars. 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 million dollars to them isn't going to matter to their day-to-day lives, but it's going to matter to the psyche of the people that they're asking to pay Target Field prices to go watch this team.
Deep down, they do not want to be, or they do not want to do what it might take financially to be at the big table. A term that, the president of basketball operations, Tim Connelly, popularized, that I think has gotten attention in part because it's such a contrasting philosophy, largely to what the Twins continue to say, which is we're about right sizing the payroll.
And think of how that's energized Wolves fans
100%.
That are already on fire. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that probably the saddest thing about the way this went at the trade deadline is nobody, including from within that clubhouse, was all that worked up over it because their expectations were so low.
They know.
That's what they said. Well, we know what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
So why get all that upset about it? And to me, if you're running the team If you're Falvey, you're going, well, I guess I got a good gig. I'll stay with it. But it's got to be deflating, I would think, to him as well.
Right.
That's the message that is even conveyed in the clubhouse, where people apparently don't even bother to get annoyed enough over a situation that should be very, very troubling.
All right, we got to be quick for lightning round.
We'll do it.
I have faith. 4 U.S. residents have been released in a massive prisoner swap with Russia. That includes journalist Evan Gershkovich and Marine veteran Paul Whelan. Both were convicted of espionage charges, which they have denied.
I tweeted a beautiful photo of Gershkovich's mom running into his arms on the tarmac. And I've been told by several individuals that it was a doctored photo. And I tried to be calm about it, and I tried to be collected, and then I lost my mind. Guardsy, we got to be sure. We know this, right? Twitter isn't the real world.
It's not.
Okay, just because if it is the real world,
we're doomed.
We're doomed.
It's
that we
over.
Can't just appreciate the emotion of that moment.
It was incredible. The video that the White House put out with all the families in the Oval Office as well, talking to their family members for the first time, unbelievable.
Enough said. The NFL will reportedly be testing new Hawkeye technology from Sony to make the right call when it comes to first downs. The camera system will help make sure refs know if the ball has reached the first down marker.
Can't make it up.
Totally.
It's going to start in the preseason.
Long overdue. Long overdue.
Got to get it right.
You got to get it right. How many times do you see an official 3 yards behind the play, spotting it incorrectly? I'm a sideline reporter, Dan. I see the inaccuracies of this week in and week out.
And that's why the Gophers have not been able to win the Western
We've had big issues.
Division.
We need a better spotting crew. This is long overdue. I'm completely confused by the new kickoff stuff. I watched it on Thursday night. It's going to take some time to get used to, by the way. It's very crazy.
Well, a federal judge has overturned a $4.7 billion verdict against the NFL in a class action lawsuit filed by Sunday Ticket subscribers. In June, a jury awarded $4.7 billion to subscribers after ruling the NFL violated antitrust laws. But the judge now says witness testimony had flawed methods to determine the cost and should have been excluded. So this case started back in 2015. This is the second ruling in favor of the NFL.
Well, I'm bitter.
Hope you didn't spend that money, Dan.
That's money out of my pocket because I've been a DirecTV. I've been a subscriber to.
You're like the first one
forever, I think.
Yeah.
We were warned by legal experts that the judge could do this, but man, oh man,
Goodell got to him.
Talk about a reversal, a 180.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get any more dramatic than this.
The Wild giving out a huge new contract to defenseman Brock Faber. The team signed the 21-year-old Maple Grove native to an 8-year, $68 million deal. It's the biggest contract ever given to defensemen in franchise history.
I can't believe Lori Fisher didn't come back this week for this show because of the Brock Faber. Fellow Maple Grove resident. We know Lori's very proud of her Maple Grove roots. The fact that Cisco lives there, and now that one of us, Brock Faber, homegrown, probably had Nordy the mascot coming to his birthday parties as a 7-year-old, is playing for his hometown organization and thriving for his hometown organization. It's a good story. It's a good story, and he's a good player.
Too many years for me. I get nervous with
He's
those
21.
Heels.
He won't even be 30 by the time this deal's done.
We'll see what we're saying in 4 years.
Well, it is almost the best time of the year. The Great Minnesota Get-Together just a few weeks away. We're going to look at some of the new attractions.
This is Natalie's Maple Grove.
Couple
She
new
loves
rides, new
the
vendors.
State
This
Fair.
is my Maple Grove. I cannot wait for the fair.
We love it. We're there every single day, basically.
Yeah, we're there.
Between the two of us. I just hope it's not as hot as it is right now, because this is
enough said.
It's unbearable in this kind of heat.
Did you like any of the new rides, Natalie? Did you take
I hate
a
rides.
look at the list?
Not a ride gal.
You're just there for the food and the farm?
Not a ride gal.
Okay.
Food and the farm. You can stick with food.